This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
Sales of D&D.
Maybe all of the open gaming license stuff and maybe all of the hoopla about whatever scandal that you want to talk about doesn't mean much in the long term of people putting down money to play D&D.
Do you do an extended recap or do you try to do like a sort of reboot or soft reboot of the campaign?
No recap. Let those suckers figure it out.
Let them figure it out.
How to find a satisfying campaign ending.
Well, monkeys, dance.
All of that and more right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 tabletop RPG podcast in every realm. That's right, throughout the planes, whether you're in the Feywild or the Shadowfell or the Plane of Mechanus or one other one that I'm not going to remember, the Nine Hells. This is what they're all rocking out to in the Nine Hells, is the Eldritch Lorecast. My name's Ben Byrne, and I am joined, as always, by Shawn Merwin, James Hake, Dael Kingsmill, and Dael, in the spirit of coming into the holiday season, what do you think is a great tabletop RPG gift to give?
Oh, that's tricky because are they a DM? Are they a player? I like giving players like a fancy, like leather-bound journal. I guess it doesn't work if they're like super anti-note taking.
I was about to say, is that kind of a hint from the GM? Like, you'll need this. Yeah.
But you know, like a sort of journal or a fancy, like those little bookmarks that look like swords or, you know, things like that, I think can be really fun because they almost inevitably they have too many dice. Like it's getting harder and harder to give people dice and also be sure that they will like those dice. But I don't think that people are ever upset about dice. I'm never upset to be given dice. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just overthinking it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Shawn Merwin.
Dice. Definitely dice. Just straight up dice. How about a copy of the book Playing at the World by John Peterson? A history of games and role-playing games throughout history. If they're into history, great. If they're not, they can set up on their shelf and they look really erudite.
That's a great point. I actually think that's a really good idea, is like any of those kind of, because there's a couple now, like history of D&D specifically itself, history of role-playing games, game theory, style books. I think that's actually a really good shout that I would not have thought of. James Hake.
I love to give people small indie RPGs for Christmas based on some kind of topic that they love. And it doesn't hurt that I usually go to PAX Unplugged right before the holidays. And that's a great place to get little indie games. I got a copy of Bully Pulpit's Skeletons recently by the guy who made Fiasco. Very fun for a friend who's got a little sort of a little bit of goth and a little bit of quirky in him. Just a fun little game about being a skeleton. And you know, if it's like a 10-page book, it's not too expensive. Not too hard to read, right? Very hard to get people into playing weird new RPGs. And hey, you never know. They probably won't read it. That's fine. But they might run a weird little indie game because of it. Have a fun little one-shot.
At the very least, I feel like they're often inspiring. Even if you don't end up running them, even if you don't end up reading the whole thing. I often look at those sorts of games and go, oh, isn't that cool? Doesn't that make me think of blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. What would you get someone, Benjamin?
Oh, I've been asked the opening question. Oh, goodness. What would I consider? Well, I think just quickly, James, that's also a really good call because I've been gifted RPG books before, like full meaty RPG books. And don't get me wrong, very appreciative. And the person put thought into that book. But I always feel a little bit bad because I'm kind of like, I'm not really going to get around to playing that, you know? It's kind of like gifting a Warhammer nerd miniatures because usually Warhammer nerds have a very specific idea of what they want to plug into their army. When you're playing an RPG, it's kind of like, I don't know, but something thin, something small, something that they can pick up and kind of play in an evening, I think is a great shout because it fits very well.
Enough stalling, Ben.
Dice. Dice are great. Yeah.
Actually, Alpeggio in chat says that their friend sent out dice advent calendars to their entire D&D group.
Nice.
And I think that's so super cute. I also saw someone online recently, it must have been on TikTok or somewhere, where someone was like, they're just making advent calendars out of anything. This is a dice advent calendar? Who would want that? And the entire comment section is D&D people going, oh.
Boo this man. Boo, boo. What the hell? Who wants dice? Come on. I'm in that
Come
comment
on.
section. Come on.
Well, speaking of sales, not much news this week, so I have stolen it from the one news source that will never fail us, the number 2 tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms, Mastering Dungeons, where last week there was a very interesting conversation between yourself, Shawn, and Teos Abadia, your co-host on Mastering Dungeons, about the sales of D&D through the years. And this topic is also going to show the fallacy of AI, but that'll come around at the end. So you were looking at data, sales data that I got via Mastering Dungeons that came via Ben Riggs, worth noting, a D&D historian, about 2013 sales data versus 2019 sales data. And then the conversation touched very lightly on 2025 sales data, or what we can kind of extrapolate. Shawn, you'll have to, I'm trying not to make like definitive statements because I haven't seen the data myself. So you might need to guide me through a little bit of this based on the conversation you and Teos had. Go ahead.
As I told Teos today, I don't listen when he talks. So I'll have to guess on what we're actually discussing this, just seeing the notes that are in front of us here.
All right. So the 2013 sales for D&D for the year were pegged at being $15.5 million, split between actual RPG books, adventure books, splat books, that sort of thing. D&D Insider, which was the magazine at the time, if I'm not mistaken, based on D&D, e-novels, board games, and miniatures. And what was interesting about that to me is that only 26% of sales in 2013, or I think actually Teos' exact wording was about a little over a quarter of sales, were actual RPG books. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. Right before the...
We're just waiting for the whole thing before we...
Okay, all right, cool. All right, let me do the whole thing then. Compared to 2019, so 2013, for context as well, if this hasn't jumped out at people, was right before 5e comes along. So this is the absolute tail end of 4th edition as well.
Where there were no books published.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Shawn.
That were for sale. Just to be clear, there was pretty much a calendar year where no new actual role-playing game books. They might have published like The Art of, or some book like that, but no role-playing game specific books. And still a quarter of the gross revenue was from those books that had been in print for at least a year.
15.5 million in 2013 compared to 2019, which I agree. I think Teos said in the Mastering Dungeons episode, 2019, kind of the height of 5th edition. 2019 was about 2 years after I got into the game, and it does kind of feel like that pre-lockdown period where D&D was just on that upward trajectory based on a lot of the things we've talked about before, the boom in D&D YouTube, Critical Role kind of becoming really big in the cultural zeitgeist around that point.
The cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah, thank you.
Flying Ghost.
And at that point, sales have boomed up from 15.5 million to 71.1 million. Quite the increase. And 73% of that is RPG books, player's guides, adventures, etc. So that's pretty interesting.
So most of their sales, by a pretty wide margin, come from the actual books itself.
Yeah. And we see a real decline in the sales by percentage, not necessarily of gross, but by percentage of those sales, like novels, e-novels, board games, which weren't being produced kind of as much around that time. And I think that when you think of D&D, maybe 3rd, 4th edition, you think like novels and that's kind of where the cultural zeitgeist around D&D was, whereas in the middle of 5th edition it's moved away from kind of that literature media into digital media, the internet, YouTube, that sort of space as well, which I thought was interesting.
It's also interesting that in 2019, 21% of that gross sales came from drive-through RPG.
Yeah,
so
right.
That means that the DMs Guild and Wizards only get 20%, give or take. The creators get 50% and drive-through gets 30%. So 21% of their revenue came from the 20% that they were getting from the sales of Drive-Thru RPG. Now that also includes not just the DM's Guild, but the old third edition, second edition, first edition basic games that you could buy there. So they may get a bigger percentage of that. I don't know, but that just 20% of 71 million. I'll let you do the math there, but that's more than they made, I believe, everywhere in 2013.
It's really impressive
right.
given how around that time we're reaching this sort of point of oversaturation with the DM's Guild. People were saying the DM's Guild was starting to become unable to be useless, because there was so much stuff on there, so much bloat. But it was, I guess that bloat worked out pretty well for Wizards, huh?
Well, I would think that, like, my memory of that timeline is that what you're talking about there, James, comes a little after 2019.
Oh, yeah.
My memory is that 2019, maybe it's on the tail end, but still very much in that boom period of, like, Adventurers League here locally was starting to take off at that time. A lot of local folks were starting to write Adventurers League adventures, or had been writing Adventurers League adventures. And people, I think, we're getting to the midpoint of 5th edition before 5e 2024, they've played Curse of Strahd. They've played, whatever other adventure had come out before, Storm King's Thunder. And they were kind of looking for, what else is there? What small adventure can I put into my game? That was about the point where I think I started to discover the DM's Guild, and folks that were on a similar journey to myself. I think that's kind of just the moment before that oversaturation really started to kick into DM's Guild that we kind of have today.
I would believe that.
And then compare this, and this is the number I might need a little bit of help on, because I did go looking for these numbers specifically to put my eyes on them, but I'm not as good an investigative journalist as Teos is. The 2025 gross sales for D&D in one quarter, I think you were talking about Q3, was 60 to 70 million. I think that number's been a little bit extrapolated out of Wizards of the Coast's earnings, kind of making a little bit of an assumption, carving aside like the Magic the Gathering money and other kind of revenue incomes. But nevertheless, if that is even close, D&D made about as much in a quarter as it made in the entire year of 2019. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. Teos and some of the people that listen to Mastering Dungeons get together and they throw these numbers together and they look at earnings reports and they look at various sales and they go about it in various ways.
Here I can't even be bothered reading an Unearthed Arcana. Honestly.
And so they have different ways of getting to numbers, and usually those numbers, when they take them from different directions, are close. Sometimes they use this method and it's not close. And so this is a little, it's a bit of a guess, but in the range of 60 to 70 is
what it's like? It's like in a crime show when they triangulate the position of a thing.
Exactly.
It's like somewhere in here is where the serial killer lives.
But even if it's, 10%, 20% less, you're still talking about $50 million in a quarter, as opposed to 71 over a course of a year when D&D was at its peak, which shows you that maybe D&D is at its peak right now. And maybe all of the open gaming license stuff and maybe all of the hoopla about whatever scandal that you want to talk about doesn't mean much in the long term of people putting down money to play D&D or buy accessories or buy dice or whatever.
And it's worth doing because it's the moral thing to do, not necessarily because it'll stick it to the man and hurt their bottom line.
Well, this is why I mentioned AI earlier, is because in trying to find sales numbers, I did some very rudimentary Google searches, started with very rudimentary Google searches, but it was literally like D&D sales 2025 or something like that, right? And the Google AI was like, D&D is having terrible sales over the last couple of years, blah, 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 blah. And the videos that were popping up were kind of YouTubers going like, the worst edition ever, the sales are crashing, everything's on fire. And I'm like, Oh, I see. So Google has just grabbed the most popular kind of information in quotation marks.
Of content creation. Google's algorithm encourages YouTubers to create catastrophizing titles, which then feed the Gemini AI to think that it's, oh no.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The other question I have about this, though, because there's not the percentage breakdown, because it you know, the gross sales for 2025 have had to be triangulated. It's not necessarily as hard data. There's not the breakdown between like RPG books and the different things. What I would be curious about is where Baldur's Gate plays into this. We're 3 years out from Baldur's Gate now, so maybe it's not playing as big a role, but like, is it counted within these calculations? And not just Baldur's Gate itself, but things like that. Video games, even the D&D movie a couple years ago. Not sure.
I'll bet it is. I'll bet that, you know, when Wizards, whoever it was, said that they'll be seeking, you know, alternative revenue streams for D&D.
Sure.
Well, yeah, that's the merchandising, that's the tie-in, that's the licensing of the IP. And so, yeah, I'll bet if those numbers are being counted in there and it's not just the books, then yeah, those almost definitely count.
So that's your thumbnail for today. Did I say that out loud? And speaking of merch, you can go get some, and speaking of gift giving, right now at the Ghostfire Gaming merch store. That's right. This is ghostfiregaming.com/merch. We've got shirts like the one I'm wearing right now. Unfortunately, this is the only shirt I'm wearing today.
Oh, thank goodness.
Take it off
I forgot
anyway.
to do my bit again.
Dael, I feel like at this point you need to explain what your bit was.
I need you to imagine it because it's apparently never going to happen. It's
Everybody go into your mind palace.
Go into your mind palace right now. The bit was going to be me doing exactly Ben's bit, but I've just drawn my crappy stick figure versions of each of the art pieces on a sheet of paper and pinned the paper to my shirt. and then there's another one and another one. That's the bit.
Yeah, no, perfect.
That's a great
So it's exactly the kind of bit is if I had done it the first time, it would have been funny. But after mentioning it 3 times, it couldn't be funny.
Look, if that doesn't sell a Ghostfire Gaming shirt, I'm not sure. That description, I'm not sure what will. Because, of course, any purchase from the Ghostfire merch store does support this podcast. And actually, I think, you know, like kind of merchandise shirts and things, they're a pretty safe gift in terms of what we were talking about before. Like, do they have too many dice? Are they going to play that RPG book? Well, everybody needs clothes. Dael for the response.
Oh, this isn't a response, but I was just going to ask because I realized that you have asked me in past episodes where we talked about this what my favorite one of the designs was. But did we ask you what your favorite was?
Probably the one I'm wearing, which would be the werewolf. I really like the werewolf.
So my favorite's the vampire and your favorite's the werewolf?
Is that ironic?
We've entered a topsy-turvy universe because you love vampires and I love werewolves.
Yeah, but I do love this character. That's kind of, so each shirt kind of has a double exposure of a couple of different artworks of the themed monster, and the werewolf one has the werewolf at the top, but it also has the character. You can kind of, I'm just getting it in frame. I don't know whether this will play on the actual episode, but go watch the Grim Hollow cinematic trailer. It shows the guy turning into the werewolf. It's a sick piece of art. It was really well animated as well. The cinematic trailer I absolutely love, and a lot of the artwork's been used from it to create the artwork for the shirts. So.
Ben, that bit played great on camera, but you know what'll really play great on? The podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Pause this podcast, go Google the cinematic trailer, you'll understand. Or better yet, go to Ghostfire Gaming.
Dishes, pull over to the side of the road.
Head to ghostfiregaming.com/merch or follow the link that's in the description or up above Shawn right now, and you can take a look. We've got tote bags and notebooks as well. There wasn't much other news this week, so we're going to jump into some listener emails. James, where would people email if they were going to ask us questions?
podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
Oh, I liked that.
Nice.
Yeah, that was good. That's going to stick in people's minds.
That was a good read.
Josh did do this and asked us about restarting a campaign after a hiatus. How do you restart a campaign that's been on hiatus for a long period of time, possibly months or even years? Do you simply jump in like it's the next session and recap the previous one like nothing's changed? Do you do an extended recap? Or do you try to do like a sort of reboot or soft reboot of the campaign, like it's almost a session 0, or you're just kind of resetting up the world again for everybody? What's your approach?
Yeah, what's everyone's opinions on this?
No recap. Let those suckers figure it out.
Let them figure it out.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I genuinely need everyone's advice on this as well. I'm in this exact situation.
Oh, there you go.
The question I think that came in may have mentioned a pregnant. What are the players going to want? Which is generally a question you're going to ask anyway. So if you haven't been playing for, say, 6 months, and in those 6 months, people have been going through life changes in your group, there's a chance that they want to show baby pictures. There's a chance that they want to talk to each other. Now, if they socialize offline, right, outside of the game, then you probably don't want to do that. But always give that opportunity, because there's nothing worse than the game master who gathers the players in, and the players just want to say hi to each other. And the game master's like, no, we must play now. So if it's a socializing group, I called
I've just
Ben
been
out
called
there
out.
specifically. Give them the opportunity to get that socialization out of the way, because otherwise it's waves against the dam waiting to burst as soon as there's a break and someone starts showing baby pictures or someone asks someone else personal questions. So if that's what needs to happen, let it happen. Set aside a period of time and say, hey, let's chat. Then we'll get to the real answer to this question, which I will let someone else take care.
Well, I just want to
no, Ben, you can't talk.
That was such good advice, though. Like, I even think going as far as doing a separate catch-up, saying like, hey, we haven't seen each other in like 9 months for a very specific reason, or whatever length of time. Let's just get together and have lunch. Let's have a barbecue. Let's have a, whatever
like
sort of hangout.
the D&D group, but not to play.
Exactly. I think that's fantastic advice.
I think once all of that is out of the way and you actually are ready to get down, do a session 0, do a session 1, there's a lot of routes you could take. But my personal preference is the time skip. Real time has passed in the real world. So go ahead and unify those expectations. Don't fight. Don't fight against the current. Don't expect the real world to have changed, but the fantasy world to be exactly the same. Have them take a moment and learn where their characters have gone in the intervening months or years. And if they were at a cliffhanger or something, fighting a big boss or whatever, work that out outside of the game. Unless it's completely intractable, and you'll know if it is, just find a way to resolve all of that and start 2 years later.
The reason I'm clutching my pearls is because that's so scary to me. It's like when a TV show does a time skip, and I'm like, but my friends who I haven't seen these friends of these fictional friends for this, 3 years or whatever the time skip is. Oh man, it's so stressful to me, but also it's very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. And the idea of, resolving that cliffhanger by being like, well, we've all talked about what happened, so now I can throw in little flashbacks for each of you and you remember when this, blah, blah, blah. That's kind of fun and I don't know, it's TV showy. And I always try to think about D&D like a TV show, which maybe just reveals something about my psyche. Let me ask you this. So the specific situation I'm in, sorry, Josh, it's about me now. The specific situation I'm in was that I was running a fixed length campaign that was intended originally to end sort of just before I went over to the States for an extended period of time. But, things get in the way. It doesn't quite work out the way you think it's going to. And you end up, we ended up finishing probably 2 sessions out from the planned ending. So it was really building a lot of tension towards this sort of climax of the story. And then I was gone for 3 months. And then in the time I was gone, there were weird changes in the friend group. And then, and it builds up over time. And then I'm sitting there going, okay, I need to get us back into this so we can finish it. But every time I think about that, it becomes a bigger and bigger task in my head because I'm like, well, I'm going to have to build up a couple of extra sessions into the story that I wasn't originally planning to because I need to build up that tension again. But then what am I going to fit in there? I don't remember what this person said. I'm a crazy person who did audio recordings of each of those sessions, but I can't find where the audio recordings are. There's all sorts of things in the mix there that I think just make it probably a bigger task in my head than it actually is. I think in a way, James's first instinct was right, which is just let the players figure it out, because I am building this up to be a big thing that's going to be difficult and the players are going to hate it. But if I just said, hey, let's get together and finish this story, my players would be stoked and they would all sort of try to remember at the same time, and maybe we'd forget stuff, but who really cares? We're having fun. We're playing D&D.
And there's truth in that joke of mine, right? My real answer here is just a serious version of the joke answer, because this is just figure it out. This is, we're going to tie that off and now figure out something new. And it gives a GM a lot of room to not make a lot of hard decisions other than how did you resolve whatever cliffhanger you were on right now.
Yeah, it sounds like Dael's fallen into the pre-campaign gap or pitfall that I think a lot of particularly new GMs fall into, which is, oh, we're going to start our campaign soon and it's going to be so good, but I've just got to finish setting up the world. And it's like, okay, we're never going to play because you need to write your magnum opus of what the world is first. And it's just get playing, as soon as you can.
Exactly that. That's actually a really great way of putting it, because it's you build it up as this perfect version of it, this sort of, platonic version of the game in your brain that it will never be, and it never will be that. And I this is the campaign. When I say I love it when friends have their babies at the table who are being fussy and they have to pay attention to it, and the cat is jumping around and knocking things off. I love when that happens. This is the campaign I'm thinking of when I describe that. So
sure.
It's on me. I need to get over it. I need to just start playing.
I think the time jump that you mentioned before, James, though, is also a really good call, because I think it can feel odd doing a re-session 0, because everybody knows the character that they're playing, right? And everybody largely kind of knows the world, although they might have forgotten the details. And then there's also just the thing of getting everybody back into the zone, so to speak, the ephemeral, indescribable, yes, we're in the game world and we're ready to kind of go. And a soft session 0 of this is the town that you're in. This is what you remember about it. These are the important details, without over-laboring it and telling them a narrative story first. Can feel a little contrived if everybody thinks they already remember where they're going. But if you've got a time skip, you've got a reason to invite the players into kind of describing what has happened to your character in the meantime. What's something new that they've learned? What's something new that they've gained or lost? That kind of gives them that a task to do that they might be doing in a session 0 when they're introducing a brand new character.
There's some great human psychology here about the magic circle that's worth reading about if you want to be a sort of overqualified GM. And what the trick here is that the magic circle is too old, right? You need to build a new one. And it's hard to build a new one for exactly the reason you're describing here in session 0, Ben, because everyone is in a different state of mind than they were when they originally created the magic circle that kind of is the portal into the secondary world here. So you got to just draw a new one.
That's really good. And also I feel like it slots right into Shawn's advice, because if you have those social gatherings with just the D&D group, but it is not for D&D, I think that really greases the wheel in terms of redrawing that magic circle. I think it greases the wheel in terms of communication, which we always talk, everyone in the D&D space who gives advice is always talking about how important communication is, and it is. And that is more and more difficult if you only hang out while playing D&D. So opening those avenues of friendship and trust and love.
And on the other hand, if your group is just a bunch of yahoos who are getting together to roll dice and they don't even really like each other all that much, just sit down and start rolling dice, because that's what needs to happen to keep everybody moving.
Sometimes things are so easy.
Yeah.
I agree. Ian, who's just popped into chat, has talked about, coming back after a long gap, running the first session as a one-shot, as opposed, especially because heavy plot lines can be difficult to dive back into. I think if you are a group that as Shawn, you've just described, they just look. The reason we play the game is not the heavy narrative. It's the I want to roll dice and play the game. I want to have advantage on my attack because I took this specific feat, and that's what I find fun about it. Just throw a monster at him for the first session and get going again. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one other thing I'll check in there that I overstress myself about is I get to thinking, well, what if I don't remember all the important details? I'm the DM. I have to remember all the important details. But even though that is something that stresses me out, much like a time skip, I think often actually the stuff that you do remember is the important stuff.
Sure.
The stuff that's stuck in your head, you only need that. Don't worry about the minutiae. You can fill it in with new stuff and no one's going to notice.
By our powers combined, we solved it. You're welcome, Josh. Hopefully things work out. But Alex has also emailed. Shawn, where did Alex email?
I believe Alex emailed podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
Alex did, and asked kind of the opposite question almost, which is how to find a satisfying campaign ending, like permanent ending for that campaign, that story. How do you wrap up a long campaign in a way that feels satisfying and not like an anti-climax if things fundamentally go right for the players the entire way through? I.e., the example that they give is the party goal is to steal an object, which, via clever ideas and good rolls, avoids any actual direct conflict or feeling of stakes because they don't have to fight the person that they're stealing the item from. And I think there's another question in here which sometimes I struggle with as well, which is I've set up a monster's lair. Here is a monster. The intention, the design intention is that the party are going to walk in and they're going to fight the monster and they're going to use their cool class abilities on their character sheets. But the players are like, well, what if we did this instead? And as a GM, I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess that would work, but then where's the drama? Where's the tension? Where are the stakes? Where's the game? If that makes sense.
This is my turn to be the one who sits back and asks for help too, because this
Okay.
kills me a lot. Yeah,
Sure.
I fall victim to this all the time.
Oh,
Well,
I wanna
monkeys dance.
I want to differentiate between a campaign and an adventure. Sometimes people say campaign when they're really talking about like a 4 to 8 hour adventure. And something in this question made me think that maybe it was talking about an adventure rather than a full campaign. Only because like if the last thing of your campaign is sneaking into somewhere to take an item, that seems to me a good ending for an adventure, but not a full campaign.
Sure.
So the first thing is make sure that if you're talking about a full 1 to 16 campaign, that the ending is epic enough that it can't be solved by just sneaking in and taking the item, right? You should have multiple stages, that maybe a false ending, maybe, where they defeat this one thing, but the real villain steps out. Nothing as cheesy as I simplified it to, but, think in terms of layers rather than in terms of this one thing. I just want to start there. In terms of ending the campaign, I'm going to stop there because I want to hear what someone else has to say.
I like what you said, Shawn, because I think you're right. To get more specific into Alex's example, I think he was talking about like they had to fight a dragon, but they never actually fought it. This sounds very Smaug suddenly, because they managed to sneak in and steal the object. And Alex said that their campaign was a heist, right? So that was the style of campaign they were running. But I think if that's the case, to your point, it's like, okay, so build multiple layers of the heist. And even if the point is that they can avoid direct conflict with the dragon, maybe they have to fight minions in a certain part of the lair. Maybe they have to sneak through an area and failure is an encounter with the dragon, but success just takes them on to the next challenge. Then they have to figure out how to get through a locked door and then a trap. You know what I mean? Like you were saying, there's layers of challenges that aren't just. I'm reminded of the Grey Fox storyline from Oblivion, the Elder Scrolls game. It was a very thief-driven quest where you just snuck around, but it still felt epic because the whole story was gathering the objects you would need to pull off this heist, which was still a dungeon crawl. It just wasn't one with a lot of combat in it, if that makes sense.
When I think of the adventure in Cholt, what was that?
Tomb of Annihilation?
Tomb of Annihilation. The final battle is supposedly with Acererak, but that's not even the final thing because there's more beyond that. Now, it may not be as climactic as that, but if you remember, spoilers for a very, very old adventure now, the plan wasn't to defeat Acererak. The plan was to break the machine. So that's a case where you could have something like all you need to do is break the machine. Oh, on the first round, we figured out a way to break the machine using some wish spell or whatever. Acererak's still there. Right. So you could still have them do that. And even if they do that and teleport away, Acererak is a pretty powerful godlike being. So it could follow you. It could summon dragons to chase you down, right? It could do these things. So if it does go not as you expected, you're the DM. It's your story as well. You can do other things to make it feel epic, even if it was sort of anticlimactic.
So I've gone back and just glanced at Alex's full question because I remember reading something in there that made me go, and I couldn't remember what it was. But so Alex specifically says, do you have any tips for wrapping up the end of a long campaign in a way that feels satisfying, particularly in regards to a not combat heavy situation like a heist? And they sort of describe that their players did come up with a lot of creative, interesting ideas and they were successful in their roles, but that sort of thrill of the tension and will they make it, won't they make it, followed by the release, the success, the sort of, woohoo, denouement, that sort of didn't feel as, fulfilling. I think that comes down to a couple of things. I think, first of all, if you're looking at something like heists specifically, I just said it. I'm such a TV brained person, but look to TV, look to film. How do they wrap things up? If it is indeed the end of a long campaign, right? This is the end of these characters. We're done with these characters. This is the resolution. Then I would be looking to things like the end of the remake of The Italian Job, where you see how each of these people has spent their money. You know what I mean? Because hopefully over time you've developed the reasons why these people are pulling off this dragon heist, one might say.
Hold on. Which Italian Job are you talking about?
The remake.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. We're on.
I said.
Yeah, the actual Italian Job ends very differently. But anyway, continue.
Yes, of course. It's a little more lock, stock, and two smoking barrels. But yeah, I think look to film for those kinds of things because you can have your successful challenge, and even if that didn't feel like an ending, you can create an ending by focusing. It's almost like every Korean drama has like an episode at the end after they've already solved every problem, and they're just like, well, now let's wrap everything up in terms of these characters and their story arcs. And I think that can create a satisfying sense of resolution. If it's in regards to that sense of climax in the final challenge, to make it feel like a final challenge, even if it's not a boss fight, I think part of that is going to come down to, and this actually is something related to a different question in the question bag, but there's a problem that you run into there where particularly a game like D&D is focused on combat, and combat is the area where it is most fun in a lot of ways because that's the place where you roll a lot of times. And so you are going to have exciting moments happen. If you're playing like 5 characters, 6 rounds of combat against the final boss, something cool is going to happen at least once because you are just rolling that many times. But when you're doing skill-based challenges, there are fewer rolls. And so there is fewer opportunities for something to feel like, oh no, it's dire, everything's going badly because someone rolled a 1. And there are also fewer opportunities for it to feel like, aha, we've triumphed. So you have to kind of create that in a different way, which is why other games, it's like, is it Shadow Dark or Blades in the Dark? There's like 3 games I get mixed up where they have the clocks that create that sense of risk, right? Which game is it?
Blades
in the Dark.
Blades. Thank you so much. I knew it was one of the games in the dark. Yeah. But they have their sort of clocks that determine the risk level of what's going on, right? You kind of have to build that sense of risk and lots of different individual moments separately, because a game like D&D in particular doesn't build that in for you. I don't know. James had something to say.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about roles because I think you're really onto something here with the tension at times correlating to how much rolling, how much you're doing of stuff is happening. At a certain point, it falls off a cliff because you're just rolling too much. But like there's a sweet spot. And you're right also that skill checks and the infamous skill challenge are often sort of tricky to negotiate, mostly because D&D doesn't have really good, like, strong systems for handling them. Combat gets a lot of stuff put on that system. And so the players have all these tools that they can use and feel clever by using them. Plus, then there's some dice stuff that creates these epic success or failure moments. And so I know I said at the very beginning of this that this is something that I am myself trying to figure out how to do. And so take this as sort of a revelation of something I want to try rather than an answer for you. But I would love to, in a moment like this, look at all of my players' character sheets and figure out, okay, what can they do outside of combat? What actual like tools on their character build can be used in the same way that their combat builds can be used? Because ultimately what needs to happen is they need to fear danger a little bit, right? That's where the tension comes from. Fear of failure. And in D&D, failure could be death or defeat, or it could be the loss of whatever the greater objective is. And in combat, it's implicit, right? We know that if we fail a combat, we're going to die. But because skill challenges have a little bit less of that mechanical systemic weight to them, that threat is not so easily assumed. So find ways to, on one hand, make the threat obvious, make the stakes obvious. And on the other hand, make sure that they have tools that they're excited to use to help achieve their goal against those stakes. And just because for you, the DM, you don't do that stuff as much, it is going to be a harder, slower job with less obvious outcomes. It's more work.
Look to genre. Always look to genre.
Oh, yeah.
If you are looking to a fantasy text, you're often looking for something called the eucatastrophe, where everything looks, oh no, all is lost, and then something happens to change the sort of tide of things. If you're looking at heist texts, often you're looking for that moment when, they've done all their thinking, their planning, everything is, now we just have to execute it. But there's always something that they didn't account for, right? There's always that one thing that comes in that surprises them. I think a handy tool is things like stepping outside of your POV as the party, as the DM, the director, whoever, going, okay, let's show what the bad guys are doing over here. This guard has noticed this thing. Someone has noticed a footprint or whatever. Give them little glimpses as to what the other people are seeing and doing, because that ratchets up the, oh no, maybe we'll get caught. Yes, James?
I had the good fortune to play Test, a very sort of early pre-alpha game that James Introcaso was making with the Draw Steel engine at PAX Unplugged called Crows. And there's no NDA on this. I can talk about it as much as I want. It's a dungeon crawler, based.
Telling us or telling yourself?
I'm telling everyone that in case someone
okay, cool.
gets on my case.
Disclaimer.
It's how MCDM works. They don't do that thing there. And it's a dungeon crawler based on the engine of Draw Steel in a lot of ways, but it has this very inventory focused system. It's very Diablo-ish feeling in that way to me. And a big part of it is you're kind of fumbling around in your backpack for the stuff that you need in the proper moment. And as you take damage, your backpack gets whittled away. You start being unable to look for the items that you need in the very bottom of your pack. And that puts a real sharp bit of tension, not just on combat, but also to things like traps and stuff like that. And it just gets me to thinking those are really obvious stakes, right? You feel it right there in your body because you no longer then have your armor available or your rope available or your spell books available or stuff like that. And it makes me very, very frightened whenever something bad could happen, even if it's not a monster. And so there might be something there to mechanicalizing, to character sheetifying the threat of danger.
Make your HP how noticed you are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of makes me think of, we were talking skill challenges last week, and something that Adam said that I very much agreed with was like not knowing what the consequence for failure on like a clever idea is. And that can kind of, when the players are like, oh, we're going to try sneak past the dragon, it's like, okay, so if you roll high, is that going to, what's the consequence for failure? I guess it's fighting the dragon. I'm not explaining this very well. But as we've been talking, I've been thinking like, how could you run a heist in a way that's not just a stealth check and you succeed and therefore the tension just disappears out of the game, right? And it's like coming up with areas that the party have to move through with roaming bad guys, and you go into initiative order, and it's almost like an advanced trap, and the enemies will kind of move on their turn in a predictable pattern, but something that Dael said before around like, oh, but something unexpected happens. So maybe if we were playing Daggerheart, the GM could spend fear to cause a bad guy to turn around unexpectedly or move in a different pattern or something like that. And then the players could counter that by spending hope or, hope to be able to make it a little bit of extra movement to duck out of the way just in time, finding ways to figure out what the consequence of failure is in a fun way that keeps the sense of tension there and that success doesn't entirely overcome with a single roll. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because I completely agree because I get what you're saying. I think that there is a challenge in when you watch a movie and someone is, ear up against the safe and they're, twisting the little knob, getting the safe to do the thing, and the time is ticking down and the music's going da 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 da. That it's easy to feel tension when you're watching that. When you're playing and you just roll the dice and it says, "Yep, you succeed with your thieves' tools," that doesn't do the same thing. And how do you make it micro without making it just a war of attrition?
Yeah. And how do you make it a game as well?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like a game where you're making choices
rather than just
continuing
doing
to engage.
Like what I said about the skill challenges. How do you make it a game rather than just roll the thing you're good at over and over again?
Yeah.
Well, one way you can do it in a heist. So this goes, we're talking about heists now. I don't know how we got here, but
Alex brought up heists.
Yeah. So we get a free pass.
We're discussing making it too easy. There's also making it too hard.
Sure.
Where, you failed that first stealth check. Now the dragon's awake. All the dragon's minions are awake. And now it just turns into one big battle. One thing that you could do is something like a dice pool. And how it works will depend on the game. But rather than having an automatic success or an automatic failure, each time something doesn't go exactly right, you add another D6 to the dice pool. You can continue. You failed the stealth check. The guard who was asleep snorts, looks around, but goes back to sleep. But a die goes in the dice pool. Then you go through and you're collecting these dice. And at the end, when you're about to maybe get away with this object, but you've sort of failed 4 checks, you roll those 46. And for every 6 that comes up, one thing bad comes your way. Maybe you just roll 1 6. Maybe you roll no 6s and hey, you got away with it. Maybe you roll all 4 6s and then 4 bad things come at you. That gamifies it. It makes it less easy to game for the game master and for the player. Oh, well, we know we're just gonna have to face one guard on the way out. No, you don't know. You could face the dragon, the dragon's minions, and some group of other thieves who are coming too because of the way the dice fell. Now you have to work out the percentages and work out those things, but at least it adds a bit of mystery to it. And that would be a great way to end the campaign with that mysterious die roll of, I've got 12 6-siders, and for every 6, something bad happens, and roll that and see what happens.
Yeah, I think something you said before, Shawn, has kind of clicked into place a little bit more for me as well, which is like, as the GM, you can just make bad things happen. Even if they succeed, they get what they were going for, but something bad happens anyway to increase. Like the dragon knows something's been stolen. It's very perceptive. it can track the players to where that thing is stolen to. Or I really like the gamify for the number of sixes, so it makes it more unpredictable what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so like a success doesn't have to be unqualified, you know what I mean? If it's going to add more tension to the story.
Yeah, chat really likes that suggestion as well, Shawn, because they've been talking about push your luck mechanics, which this would fall into. You're just, can I get away with it? Can I not get away with it? Let me just, I'll just push my luck a little bit. But also the fact that this system would delay the sort of information. Did we get away with it? Did we not get away with it? Is a fun component.
I can see a cool way to integrate taking risks on making skill checks into this. Is like every action that you take, you can choose to just do it without making a skill check, but you guaranteed put a dice in the pot. Or if you succeed, you don't put anything in, but if you fail, you put 2 in. And so you get to test how lucky you feel that day.
You know what this reminds me of next is, and I'm bringing it up again, I brought it up a few episodes ago, SPGD is a YouTube channel where he talks about game design mostly in the context of war games. But he talks about, I think the guy's name is Sam Pearson, he talks about positive loops and negative loops. And a positive loop is when something happens in the game, it increases the chances of like that thing happening again. And a negative loop is when something happens in the game, it might cause kind of a drawback. Positive loops aren't always a good thing. So for example, in a competitive war game, he talks about it in the context of like, if you have good rolls and you are winning because you're removing your opponent's pieces and therefore have more pieces on the board than them, you are going to continue to win unless there is some mechanic, some negative loop mechanic built into the game to arrest the momentum. And I think one of the difficulties that we get into as role-playing games is players getting into both positive game loops, positive game loops, honestly, in any direction, where like an example of a positive game loop is if somebody goes down in combat and they're rolling death saves, they're no longer able to contribute to the combat, which can result in a death spiral if someone else goes down and then the healer goes down. That's a positive game loop because the villain is winning and therefore will continue to win as the mechanics of the game dictate. And I think trying to find ways to arrest the positive game loops of the player's success, I'm thinking of Hope and Fear, but I'm also thinking of the Beast Pool in the Grim Hollow campaign guide. Hope is a mechanic. Correct me if I'm wrong. The more you roll with hope, the more success you're going to have because you gain more hope. And the more fear you roll is a negative game loop because you might have succeeded the roll, but it gives the GM fear to spend against you. When I think of Grim Hollow, I believe the way that it works, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, Shawn, but it's kind of like when the players succeed or they make a good choice, they can gain a hope dice or a beast dice. They might not be called hope and fear. But I think a negative game loop that could be useful in this situation is when the players succeed at something, a beast pool dice is gained or a fear dice is gained, because then it's not a positive game loop of success is just going to continue to beget success and therefore take out the threat of the situation. Success just raises the stakes but kicks the can down the road a little bit for the GM to have resources to spend to be able to continue to place challenges in front of the players, if that makes any sense. That was just bouncing around in my head. Go ahead, James.
You clearly know what you're talking about here, Ben. I just wanted to point out for the audience, you said that the hope loop and the fear loop are a positive and a negative loop. They're both positive feedback loops here. Even though one has a positive outcome and one has a negative outcome, they're both positively entering feedback into a loop, right? A negative feedback loop would be something where doing something causes its opposite, like you just described over there.
Yeah. Now, I think a fate point in Fate would be the negative loop because the game master says, I am going to impose something negative on you that's going to make your character's life harder, but here is a fate point that you can then spend to get yourself out of that hole. And like vice versa, as the players spend their fate points, the game master takes them and then can use them against the players. So that would be the negative loop that evens out play as opposed to piling on play.
Dael's thrown the link to the SPGD channel in the Twitch chat. Maybe I'll link it here as well on the YouTube channel or on the wherever you're listening.
To check this guy out.
Yeah.
His thumbnails look like Game Maker's Toolkit, who I love. So I like this guy already.
Possibly influenced by. It's a relatively new channel, but it's a great channel. Unfortunately, I haven't watched many of the videos because I feel like I need to sit down with a pen and paper to do so, and making the time to do that is separate from when I'm just watching a YouTube video while I'm eating lunch or whatever.
End of the campaign. I don't think we sat down and we distinctly said, let the characters give epilogues for their characters. And you as the game master give an epilogue for important NPCs. And if you are afraid that your players might not know what that means, you do yours first as the game master. If there is a NPC that the characters have become attached to, do the 2 years later. You see the seamstress walking through the field, hand in hand with, her child who you helped rescue, blah, blah, blah. And then you let the players do their epilogues. Another thing is celebrate. Have a cake, right? Have an end of campaign cake with candles and really, outside of games, celebrate this. This is an accomplishment. If you play longer than 4 sessions, you've done more than most game groups do. So celebrate that. That is something that you should feel happy about and celebrate with more than just the story. And if you know that you're going to be continuing a different campaign, maybe just give the slightest teaser for what is to come. Yeah, as everyone gives their epilogue, there are all the NPCs, all the PCs, and then you say, picture, if you will, a beam of moonlight on a grave. The grave has these dates on it, and a hand reaches out of the dirt and points at something, right? And then just end that there. Because what that does is say, oh, I can't wait to play again.
Yes.
That's the end of a Marvel movie. You just, and then you see the words flash on screen. Yeah, the great beast will return, or
2028.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great advice. I think that I think that is what makes something feel like an ending. You celebrate it. You go, woo, let's put on hats and also some music and other things.
I want that on
good.
a cross stitch,
That's good,
Dael.
Dael.
That's how you know something feels like an ending. You celebrate it. That's deep.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, woo, put on a hat and also
Wahoo, I
music
hit
and
the
other
bad
things. Yeah.
Well, I think that the reason that's really good advice as well is because that reminds me of the campaigns that I ran in my first year of running the game is like whenever we played on a weekend, whenever we hit a big story moment, it felt really impactful because there was a kind of celebratory mood outside of the game itself. And my advice for having an ongoing campaign is generally to not make it as much of an event, but just make it part of your weekly or bi-weekly schedule, because then you're not moving things out of the way of it as much. It's just in your schedule, right? But then the inverse is just noting, like, don't let those celebrations out of game go by the wayside. Don't let it feel too routine every time you play, when you hit those big story beats.
It's Chronos versus Kairos, right? The sense of time. There are two different ancient Greek terms for time, in that Chronos is just like the regular, every day. This is the scheduled, like the time we all sort of understand and embody in everyday life. And then Kairos falls more into festival time. Like, it's something different. It exists outside of the usual expectations of time. And that's when holidays happen, right? Like, Christmas time feels different to the rest of your everyday life. And so letting those celebratory moments feel like they step outside of the scheduled expectation gets into that feeling and makes it exciting. And I am such a big believer in, when you wrap up an adventure, when you wrap up a campaign, letting the players just ask each other questions and gab and yap and say, oh, remember when that happened? I was thinking about this and this, blah, blah. And they get to ask all the questions that they've been holding off for such a long time because they're like, well, I don't know if this is going to come up or not. So I don't want to trespass and ask you all these questions about your character, but now they can. And it's so exciting to have that conversation. And, remember when that happened? And so that in itself, I think, adds into that feeling.
On that note, how much as a GM do you like to reveal to your players, like, after a campaign has ended? Because I think in one of his early videos, Matt Colville kind of spoke about, like, when the players come up to a choice, they can pick A and B. Well, if they pick A and then they ask you after the game, what happens if we pick B? You say, I don't know, you didn't pick B. Like, fate branched and you'll never, because that makes the story feel more real. And broadly, I agree, but I think that kind of became a little bit of gospel for D&D players of my generation in particular. But I've had players at my table who actually really want to see behind the screen, almost like they're Lord of the Rings behind the scenes, like making of, footage. How much do you let your players at the end of a campaign question the GM about, like, what was the bad guy thinking at this time? What would they have done if we had done this instead? Because that was a really big decision for us. Or what would have happened if we didn't let the guy out of the mirror,
I genuinely think that you should tell them the things that are exciting. Like, if you say, if you hadn't have done this, the bad guy was going to do X, Y, Z, and it was going to be really bad, but because you did that, it stopped it. Or,
Sure.
I was really hoping I was going to get to use this thing that would have, killed you all instantly. I don't know, whatever thing. If it's exciting, if it makes it exciting that they chose what they did, tell them. But otherwise, I am kind of a believer in a magician never reveals their secrets.
Sure.
But I think it's, it's a soft touch. Like you said, it doesn't have to be gospel, but it's just like, I don't know. Will it make it less exciting or will it make it more exciting for them to know?
I've literally, I go like, all right, if you want to ask me all these questions, player X, because you're always really interested, let's have a conversation after, after everybody else has left, because I know player Y really hates knowing all this kind of stuff because it ruins the magic a little. Well, speaking of ending things, it is time to end this episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. We've managed to stretch out enough with that fascinating conversation. If you want to email in, you can do so. Dael, you're the only one I haven't asked yet. Where would people email?
Well, they would email podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
Excellent. They would. And we will take those questions and we will answer them here. You can also leave comments down in the YouTube comment section or on Spotify. And also YouTube have opened up like a community tab. If you go to our channel, there's like a community tab where anybody can post. Nobody's used it yet because it's virtually invisible if you didn't know it was there. But I turned it on for the Lorecast. So I don't know, it's a little forum people can make. We'll see. Anyway, do what you like. Anyway, all right, my name's been Ben Byrne. I've been joined, as always, by Shawn and James Hake, Dael Kingsmill. We will be back next week with another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific on a Monday, and on a Tuesday it's 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on Twitch.
Got him.
Ghostfire. Yeah.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Oh, come on now. We need to put more spirit into that babadaz. Everyone! I don't know if that works.
I'm just thinking of the Brooklyn Nine-Nine tune.